Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, looking at the impact of the new People's Republic of China on Southeast Asia and the external threat for the People's Republic that the Cold War brought to the new state, notably the Korean War. If you want to also consider the Vietnam War, take a look at my video, The Soviet Union's and the PRC's Involvement in Vietnam, which you'll find on my Vietnam Wars playlist. China was misled by the Soviet Union with regard to the Korean War, which was about to be unleashed and would have a profound impact on the PRC. Korea was not mentioned during Mao's 10-week visit to Moscow. This itself is interesting, as it places a question mark over Stalin's intentions. Did he seek to embroil the new PRC in a war that he knew would only weaken it? As you will most likely know from your IGCSE studies, World War II ended with Korea divided at the 38th parallel, between a communist North and an American-backed South. In June 1950, Kim Il-sung, having flown to Moscow to obtain Stalin's agreement, invaded the South with the intent of unifying the country under communist control. Kim wanted to unite his country, and Stalin saw a war which he couldn't lose. If Kim united Korea, it would be another victory for communism, another defeat for the capitalists. If he failed, Stalin could wash his hands of the whole affair, and at least America would have got itself embroiled in another costly war. If China also got embroiled, which was always likely as it bordered the Korean peninsula, then the war would most likely be longer, and whatever the outcome, would bleed China of resources it badly needed to begin the construction of socialism, and the Soviet Union would be in a better position to dominate the region. For Stalin, it really was a can't-lose scenario. For Mao and the PRC, however, it was to be a great test. The Americans, reeling from the division of Europe, the Soviet Union's acquisition of the atomic bomb, and the loss of China, felt it had to make a stand. They saw the whole affair as a joint Soviet-Sino plot to extend communist control in Southeast Asia. In fact, Mao played no part in the plans for war, though he was informed of it when, on Stalin's insistence, Kim went to Beijing to inform him of his plans. Koreans had fought alongside the Red Army in Manchuria, and Korea had helped them in their fight against the nationalists. Mao could not then now desert Kim, as he tried to unite his country. Mao could also not now attack Taiwan, which he was planning to do, and the Americans had already said they would not intervene, because following Kim's invasion, the Americans moved their 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Straits. Plans for Tibet would have to be put on hold too. Meanwhile, the People's Republic was dealing with industrial ruin, massive unemployment in the cities, and famine in its central provinces. Even in Beijing, food supplies were not adequate. Adding to the doubts surrounding Stalin's motives, when North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel, America took the issue to the United Nations, which resolved to repel Kim Il-sung's invasion. Now, the Soviet Union could have vetoed the Security Council's decision, but it was boycotting the UN in protest of its refusal to recognize the PRC. Chiang's nationalist China, now confined to Taiwan, was still recognized as the legitimate China. Now, this seems very comradely of Stalin, defending the PRC's interests, and maybe it was. But Stalin knew of Kim's intention, so why boycott the UN at a time when the Soviet Union's veto could prevent a UN reaction? Again, we have to ask whether Stalin wanted America, the Korean Peninsula, and the PRC embroiled in a prolonged war. The way in which the war unfolded did indeed bring the PRC into the conflict. The UN force, overwhelmingly American, pushed the North Korean forces back over the 38th parallel, but critically didn't stop there. Instead, they pushed on into North Korea as far as the Yalu River, and so the border with China. Mao now felt he had to respond, and he did so in October 1950 by sending volunteers, in fact the People's Liberation Army, into the fray. A request for Soviet air support was denied. Still, they helped the North Koreans sweep the UN American forces back across the 38th parallel and deep into South Korea. The war continued for another 3 years before a truce was agreed in 1953. Millions of Chinese volunteers were involved, with 500,000 deaths and probably the same number injured. Mao himself lost a son in the conflict. There was pride and relief in the way in which the PLA had held American forces in a 3-year war, just as the Japanese had shocked Russia in 1905. So the Chinese now shocked the mighty Americans. What Mao had boasted in 1949, and here's a quote from Mao, "Our nation will never again be an insulted nation. We have stood up. No imperialists will be allowed to invade our territory again," was now a reality. But it had come at a price. The Korean War changed the character of the People's Republic. As the historian Michael Lynch notes, it left no opportunity for a smooth transition as the new China replaced the old. It cemented the hostility between the PRC and America that would last until President Nixon's game-changing visit to Beijing in 1972. America pledged itself to support Taiwan, which ruled out any possibility for the PRC to reclaim the island and finally end nationalist rule on Chinese soil. But it also led to worsening relations with the Soviet Union. Mao had no doubt that Stalin had pulled the strings throughout the whole affair, sacrificing Chinese lives for his own ends. Stalin had got what he wanted, a weakened China. He supplied China with the arms to fight the war, but China had to pay for those arms, and as a result, China's debts only increased. All this at a time when China had hoped to have begun the building of a socialist world. China experienced what could be described as a war frenzy. There were anti-American demonstrations, encouraged by a regime eager to build patriotism to new heights. And in such a charged atmosphere, and it should be noted, with both land reform being enforced and moves to control the cities underway, the CCP targeted counter-revolutionaries in a reign of terror. The campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries began in September 1950. It required Kuomintang party members to register with public security officials. There was a promise to treat leniently those who confessed or informed on others, though there were arrests and there were executions. Mao's decree in February 1951, regulations regarding the punishment of counter-revolutionaries, began the political oppression in earnest. In public mass rallies held throughout China, prominent counter-revolutionaries were publicly denounced. Those less prominent were also arrested, and the newspapers printed long lists of their names. Figures are very difficult to quote with any certainty, but those executed or else driven to suicide would be numbered in the hundreds of thousands in the first 6 months alone, with the number as high as 2 million for the 3 years of the campaign. It stretched from 1950 through to 1952. Reform through labour camps were built, in which a further 1.5 million at least were sent. Others were subjected to re-education, and others put under surveillance. So, there you are. The Korean War had a significant impact on the infant PRC. It built confidence, while at the same time it radicalised the regime, and it deepened the sense of mistrust with regard to Stalin and the Soviet Union, despite Mao's need to still lean to one side. So I hope you found this useful. Now, if you feel you would benefit from tutorials, I may well have a slot available, and I would add that they would, of course, be directed to your needs and wouldn't require any extra work, unless that's something you want. Just get your parents to get in touch with me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com, and we'll see if we can sort something out. Time zones and cost need not be a problem. But for now, let me thank you so much for listening and wish you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.